Hello guys, once again it's Matt and today we have another video. Thank you all the members, all the patrons, make sure to subscribe and let's get into it guys. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about Fox 3 missiles, 90's specifically because of course we already have the AIM-54 in the game. But with the Gripen confirmation and everything that was already confirmed, like the PL-12 for example for the J8F in a soonish, not that far kind of future, right? We can kind of guess that we are going towards a 90's Fox 3's, right? So, I mean, there is some things that I wanted to talk a little bit about it. The first thing is that all Fox 3 missiles are not the same. Not all Fox 3 missiles are the same, you know? If you compare an AIM-120A to an AIM-120C7, for example, they're quite different from each other on the performance side of things, even though they look kinda the same, you know? An R-77 compared to an R-77-1, PL-12 compared to early AIM-120's, even the MICAs, you know. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that and how they might basically be added. So the first thing that we need to do is kind of divide them a little bit. So in my opinion, we do have three missiles that are very early in this kind of development, and then we have these mid missiles, and then we have these later missiles. So early missiles in this kind of type of Fox 3 missile would be the AIM-120A, for example, the AIM-120B even, and the R-77. These are three missiles that were developed in the 80's, right, and started their production and entering service in the early 90's, right? And a missile like the AIM-120A, for example, according to most sources, would have around 28 Gs of turn, even though there are some sources that claim that it could, there is a Korean test that they did that apparently they could manage to do 35, but it should be around 30, right? It would be around 28, 30 Gs. This is the more public known information that we know, right? And an R-77 would have that as well, like 30 Gs, something like that. With the range on those missiles being very similar to missiles that we already have in game. For example, 70 kilometers of a max possible range of an R-77. There are some sources that claim even more, but it should be an effective range of 30, 40, 50 kilometers. Maybe not as much as the R-27ER, that's probably what it's going to be, a little bit less than that, but turning well and just overall having a very good maximum turning capability very quickly due to the things that he has, but losing a lot of energy as well with that. And the 120 being just a very improved Sparrow, to be honest, initially, right? It would be having the same level of performance in the turning a little bit more, right? And together with more range, so around 50 kilometers of range, 40 kilometers of range. A max range would be 50 to 60 max, and of course max aerodynamic range might be even more, but effective range would be around the same 20, 30, 40 kilometers, something like that max, right, of effective range, depending on if the target is turning or not. And then a more improved missile type would be like the MICA. The MICA would be a missile that has a 50 G turn initially up to 7 kilometers and then 30 afterwards, with 80 kilometers of range, or at least, or even the 100, there are some sources that claim, right? So improve it over those older missiles. And even the PL-12, there are some sources that claim the PL-12 can do 38 Gs, for example, and it has a lot more range as well. So it's hard to actually know where we are going to stand in this. Honestly, I do think that they are going to just add everything as they want. Like, for example, they will basically add missiles that are better or worse, and then add basically better versions of those missiles, or even add, for example, more types of missiles for these aircraft that we lack. So, for example, a PL-12, which is a very, like, it's a 2000s missiles, basically. It is supposed to be better, maybe not by much, but better than the R-77, right? Than the original R-77. So maybe if they add the PL-12 from the get-go, they might add just the R-73 as well with the MiG-29s, for example. together with the R-77, or even just jump for the R-77-1. This is just an example, but there will be a difficult kind of situation in balancing, to be honest, because some of these missiles are very, very good compared to the earlier ones in the 90s, right? It will be like comparing an AIM-7E2 to an AIM-7F. You can use the E2, but there's no comparison, right? It's a whole nother level of performance on a missile. So this is the most difficult thing, I think, when they are trying to add these things, because certain aircraft, for example the Gripen, initially only will be able to use the AIM-120B. So does that mean that, for example, the Americans will only receive the AIM-120A and be lacking behind? Or does it mean that they will add the B already to the Americans as well? And does it mean that maybe if the Americans eventually get the C variant to be comparable to the PL-12 and the MICA, for example, to be a little bit more competitive, and the R-77-1, I don't know. Does it mean that the Gripen will never receive that and be stuck with the B variant, which is worse? So there is a problem of balancing there that they are going to need to just fix. And it's not going to be easy. I think especially at first, we might see very big power creeps, right? And the second thing that I wanted to talk about is that not a lot of people actually know this, but even though these are Fox 3 missiles, they do have a tendency to have a very low, especially these older ones, a low range on their seeker, on their active seeker, which means that it's not just fire and forget missiles. Normally, if you are going to do a BVR, you are going to need to maintain the TWS lock until the missile seeker is on. Same thing that you do with the Phoenix, but with a more agile missile, fast accelerating, right? Because the Phoenix does take a little bit of time to accelerate, even though it is one of the fastest missiles in the game. It does take a little bit of time to do that. An AIM-120, for example, would accelerate much faster, and it would get to those medium ranges a little bit faster, maybe, than the Phoenix, maybe, you know? And you would need to wait until these seekers could actually turn themselves on and actually track the targets. Because if you don't do that, you will miss, just like you miss an AIM-54 shot. So there you have two problems that people don't think too much about it. Not all Fox 3 missiles are the same, first of all. There are many levels of performance in these Fox 3 missiles, so the balancing will be difficult. And the second thing is that using these missiles won't be that different from what it is to use the AIM-54. Of course, there is a factor of if you are in a closer range, which most people normally use the missiles. A lot of people do BVR from 20, 30, 40 kilometers, but a lot of people just like to fly low and just fire the missile like in a whatever situation, right? Then yes, then it would be a fully Fox 3 missile, turning at least the same as the missiles that we already have in the game. So yes, it will be a jump in technology, of course, this is obvious, right? But don't expect these missiles to be fault-proof. You know, they are avoidable, especially the earlier ones. I don't know how they're going to add these balancing factors together with MICAs. For example, the MICA is a very scary missile. PL-12 is a very scary missile. The C7, C5 AIM-120s are very scary. The R-77-1, I would imagine that it is as well. So it's really hard to actually guess. And of course, other nations can receive other missiles that are going to be very hard to evade as well, like the AIM-4, for example, for the Japanese and others, right? So really, really exciting to think about this, but just have that in mind that it's not as easy as it looks with the Fox 3s. They're still grounded with physics, right? They're still in the same level of performance from what we have in the game right now, but it's a step up, you know? It's like 1 or 2 degrees on that stair, but it's not a whole elevator of a jump, right? So just think about that, and let me know in the comments, what do you think they will do? Will they add already more advanced variants for that everybody can receive these missiles? Or will, for example, the US and the USSR be the first ones to receive because they were the first ones to use these missiles, technically, I mean, not the USSR, but eventually Russia, but development, right? You know what I mean? Do you think these nations will receive these missiles before everybody? Or do you think they need to just wait and everybody gets these missiles, even if the PL-12 is better than AIM-120's in a certain extent, or whatever, something like that. How do you think they will be added? Let me know in the comments, subscribe, and I see you guys on the next one. Bye guys, see ya.